I enjoy writing about things I don't know about. I mean, I think that part of a problem sometimes with some books that come out, history books, is that the writer has been teaching the subject for 40 years, and he doesn't come at it with a fresh eye. Well, I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. I was actually born in Washington, D.C. During the Second World War, my father was a lawyer with the JAG at the Pentagon, Judge Advocate General's office. But I grew up here, and I went to a military school here, and I went to the University of Alabama, and then I went into the Army in 1965 as an officer. That was at the height of the Vietnam War, and of course we all went over there and did that, and came back and went to work as a reporter for the Washington Star for 10 years, and then I thought, well, if I don't get out of here and do this now, I'll never do it. So I announced that I was going to resign to write a book. And I thought that was rather brave because I'd sort of burned my bridges. I would be too embarrassed to go back to the newspaper if I, so anyway, I went and I wrote the book. And it was a success. I was very pleased. It was a novel about the Vietnam War called Better Times Than These. And I've been writing books ever since. You know, you write what you know about. And I was fairly fresh out of Vietnam, and the war was actually, I think it was still going, no, I think maybe it just about ended then, about 1976 or 7. But I'd never done anything worth a hoot in my life except that. I mean, it's something that was very impressed on me to, write about men in war. And this was a war, of course, it was very unpopular. But I used the technique of actually a number of those. Irwin Shaw wrote the Young Lions World War II book, and Jim, of course, Thin Red Line. I stole shamelessly. I'm not talking about plagiarism. I'm talking about you can steal ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. And they were quite pleased by it, actually. They said, you've really, and that's what Christopher Lehman Hupp said in the New York Times. He said something to the effect that I didn't think that a conventional war novel was going to work for Vietnam. He said, this one does, and so forth. Because I had characters, I had the girl in there, and I tried to make it as interesting as I could. And that's one of the things you pick up from newspapers is, well, let's write about the interesting thing. And so anyway, that was, I was fumbling around for technique. Now it would be easy, much easier to do it. But I don't know if I could write the same novel. I don't know if I'd have the same intensity. I tell you, after Forrest Gump, I started thinking that with novelists, if you're lucky, you've got one good novel. If you're extremely lucky, you may have 2 good novels. And if you're most fortunate, you may have 3. And there are exceptions to that. Dickens comes to mind. But I'm looking at the people, not so much that I knew, but who I know of, and they sort of burned out. And they wound up continuing to write novels that they really didn't either want to write or the subject wasn't right for them, but the publisher was pushing them because they were going to make money off of them and so on. And then they got burned by the critics. And I look at Thomas Wolfe and Fitzgerald. He drank himself to death. Hemingway blew his brains out. And I thought, well, that's not a path I particularly want to go down. And I thought, well, I'm pretty good at nonfiction. Let's try that. And I tried a book about the Civil War called Shrouds of Glory. Shrouds of Glory, yeah. And that worked. And again, Lehman Hupp reviewed it for the Times. He gave it a very good review. It was like I was paying him off. But I liked it, and I enjoyed writing it. And I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy writing long. I wrote one book called Conversations with the Enemy, and I didn't enjoy it at all.
Why?
But it was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. because the subject of it, the character, Robert Garwood, was not a very respectable person to deal with. And it was difficult. And, when you have a subject that you're writing about, you don't like the subject, but you're trying to get at the truth here. You're not trying to worry about who the subject is, but you still have to go and do all that conversation with that you're thinking, well, is this, can I really write this? I don't know. I got to sort this out. But anyway, no, I didn't like writing that book, but it came out as a good book, I think. I knew I'd arrived years ago after the Academy Awards when Forrest Gump won all those prizes, and I was invited out there, of course. And I was invited to something afterwards called the Governor's Ball, which is not the state governor, but the governors of the Academy. And the first man I met at the front receiving line was Gregory Peck. And he's such a nice guy. He shot To Kill a Mockingbird right up the road here in Monroeville. And he knew Alabama quite well. And he said something to the effect that, he said, you've created one of the few heroes that we have around here lately. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, they don't have heroes anymore. He said, they have anti-heroes. He said, but the nearest one I could think of, hero that we have a national hero in this country is Forrest Gump. And he said, and he's an idiot. And he said that to the newspapers. Afterwards, somewhere out there, somebody interviewed him. And I got a little clip from the Los Angeles Times. I stayed out there for a while. And I keep it in the little folder when I make a speech. And sometimes I'll take it out and read it to them. But it was very profound that we look at the heroes in the movies and they're all flawed. And now it's something that drives us to have flawed heroes. I think we haven't had real heroes since the old Westerns. That they're re-releasing that movie this fall. It's going to be interesting. But it came from, actually, I was living in New York, and during the winters I would come down to see my father. He was getting quite old, and he just retired from his law practice. And so I would come down and spend 3 or 4 weeks or a month. And one time I was having lunch with my father, and he started to reminisce about when he was growing up in his neighborhood. There was a young boy that we would call in those days retarded. And the kids would tease him and chase him and throw sticks at him and so on. And one day this young boy's mother bought a piano. And they saw it move into the home. And within 2 or 3 days, this gorgeous piano music began to wafted out over the old hot, dusty streets in downtown Mobile in the early 1900s. And the other kids thought, that's pretty neat. And so they took him under their wing. And they quit chasing him and teasing him, throwing sticks at him. He protected him. And I thought, after I got driving back over here, I said, I'm going to make some notes on this because I may use it as a scene somewhere, I don't know. Well, I recognized what it was because 60 Minutes had just done a feature on the idiot savant syndrome, which is basically that. A person who can do great mathematical things, remember all this stuff, and do musical things, but they can't tie their own shoes. And so I started making those notes, and that same night, at some point, I had the character of Forrest Gump. And I had written just about all of the first chapter. And that was a remarkable thing. I wrote that thing, I think, in about 6 weeks. And it was just every day it was like it was writing itself. And I remember Joe Heller telling me that Catch-22 wrote itself. I never believed him, but this thing did. And I would sit there, I'd think, I'm using my lizard brain. Lizard brain's back here in the back of your neck. And that's where it's coming from. You're going through your regular brain onto these 10 fingers. And I didn't have any notes. I didn't have any research. I said, what's he going to do today? And it was fun. It was actually the most fun I've ever had writing because I liked the character. I liked his voice. And as it turned out, it was a big deal. That's the way it happened. Yeah, I don't do this for a hobby. So I have to be disciplined. I have to approach it just like work. And right now I'm writing another history called The Soldiers, and it's about General MacArthur, General Patton, and General George Marshall. Very similar to The Aviators. And what you do is you start off, and I've done it, I don't know how many times, and that whole cabinet up there is full of, will be jam-packed with all sorts of material. And I work in the morning. I do office work. You answer emails, you talk on the phone, you get somebody to come to be your yard crew or whatever you have to do. And in the afternoons, I refresh myself with whatever I'm working with, whether I'm working with, a primary source, secondary source, meaning a book, or whatever. I get in the frame of mind for an hour or two what I'm going to write about today. How far am I going to go? What do I know? What do I learn about this character? And what materials do I need? And I throw them all on this desk, like, there's a big map of world. This is in West Point, Atlas of World War I. And so I study these things and work myself into a frenzy. And about 3 o'clock, I start 4 maybe, I start to write, and I write till 7. And that usually produces so many words a day. I have been, my publisher's been Canop for a number of books, but the last couple of books have been with the National Geographic because they had asked me to do something, and they don't operate quite like a regular publisher. At Canop, you just turn in the book and they say, okay, this looks good, we'll figure out when we're going to publish it and do it. The Geographic wants a deadline, like a newspaper, and that's pretty good for me in a way. It keeps you busy. But they, that's the way, just their practice, so they can set it all up in the catalog right, and I guess also so they don't have to have all that money dangling out there for a long time. They want to, get it done and have it so they know what's going on. But all publishers have different ways of doing things. I enjoy writing about things I don't know about. I mean, I think that part of a problem sometimes with some books that come out, history books, is that the writer has been teaching the subject for 40 years, and he doesn't come at it with a fresh eye. And of course, the history people, professional historians, they have, I'm not saying anything against them at all, but I do it differently. I don't have to find something new, or I don't have to find be revisionist. I don't have to do anything like that. But they got to do that in order to further their professional standing. I'm not bound by those rules. If I find something interesting, I just go ahead and write about it. I don't have to revise it. I don't have to do that kind of thing. And I haven't written about it for 40 years. I mean, taught it for 40 years. And so when I see something, I say, ooh, God, that's fascinating. And I get excited about it. When I get excited about it, I bring a novelist eye to it. You got to obviously make it factual, but it's all in the telling. That's it. It's all in the telling.
If I was going to be a writer, what advice would you give me?
God, I'd get a day job. Don't lose it. And that's true, because everybody wants to be a writer. Everybody can be a writer. People are publishing these books themselves and all over the place. And the publishers, they don't know what to do. They're scared to death. It is, but if you insist on doing it, you obviously need to read the very best and steal shamelessly from their ideas. Not obviously words, but the technique, the devices they use, the whole everything. Learn from the best, and then go do it. I mean, I learned very early on about his writer's block, having worked at the Washington Star for city editor Sid Epstein, who's known as the Smiling Cobra. And you didn't tell Sid Epstein if you were out covering a triple axe murder, because we had 5 editions a day. And you didn't phone in to the city desk. They said, I'm having a writer's block. I got a triple axe murder here. I can't think of anything to write. Well, you wouldn't ever do that. So I learned that whatever you do, put it down. You can fix it later. You can shape it. You'll reshape it. You'll probably change it 100 times, but get something on paper so that you can work with. And but that's that's the technique. It's a little piece of advice, but it's good advice.